Welcome to the IIFX podcast series. We have a really special guest today, Tom Miller, who is the CEO of ClearForce. Tell the folks a little bit about you and how you got started with ClearForce, etc. Tom?
Sure thing, Dr. Lou. Good morning, and it's nice to see you today. So, I am the CEO and one of the co-founders of ClearForce, and my background is in data analytics and risk management. So, I've spent my whole career from originally a banker through starting a few different analytic companies, but in all cases, staying close to understanding behavioral risk management. And then in 2016, had the opportunity to co-found ClearForce. And we're a people risk technology company that's based in Tysons Corner, Virginia. And we really set up our company to go solve big people risk problems, particularly in areas of community safety, national security, and organizational safety and security.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You know, Tom, at a basic level, how does ClearForce platform and the various risk data services work?
So I'd say it starts with our customers' conduct policies.
Okay.
So most of the organizations are going to set up conduct policies or define what they think is acceptable or risky behavior for their employees and maybe their contractors.
Yeah.
And once that happens, ClearForce is then leveraging technology to work off a roster of individuals where we're aligning real-time behavioral risk management against the specific conduct policies of the organization. And if an event or a behavior that's relevant to that organization triggers, then we're sending that in an anonymized way initially into the organization so that they can investigate the potential risk.
All right. So I'm trying to summarize what you're saying here. I think ClearForce's objective is to protect organizations, right? And keep them safe by automating investigations, right? Analytics and ongoing monitoring to detect signals of an employee risk. Would you say that's a good summary?
That's it. So we're doing 24/7 real-time monitoring of employee risk.
Yeah.
And then we're providing organizations with a privacy and governance application to make sure that all the appropriate guardrails are in place so that they can properly verify and go through their investigative process.
So you're really looking at policies that might compromise safety of the organization at that time or pose material threats, right?
100%. Could be threats to the individuals in a venue, could be threats to the employees themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in your world, what are some of the warning signals, I would say, from an employee to indicate that they could be danger to the organization themselves or to other members of the organization?
Yeah, I think a couple of probably our customers' most concerning examples would be particularly low-level patterns of criminal activity or legal issues that are happening outside of their vantage point, right? So looking at those patterns, for example, could indicate an issue that's escalating. It could indicate secondary factors, perhaps substance abuse, but it's enabling them to put those pieces together and again investigate what that risk could be. I think the other one, probably specific and relevant to your audience here, would be areas where, let's say, domestic violence is happening outside the workplace, but that's something that everybody's concerned about as a tipping point that then comes in. And so it could be an early indicator that then shows up inside or around the workplace itself.
I would say workforce is important. I would say parallel to that is our industry relies so much on subcontractors,
Right.
particularly for security. And is your services applicable for those that need help with the subcontracting?
I think not only is it applicable, I think it's often a priority.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, the 1099 contractors are the individuals that the organization knows the least about. right? And they may flow down, they should be flowing down policies and requirements that those contracting houses are running a real background check, a security-oriented background check as they come in, and providing some level of continual monitoring thereafter. But again, these are organizations that aren't, these are people that aren't necessarily attached to the organization. And so even their commitment or their loyalty to the organization is going to be very different than an employee. So a lot of times we see that as a starting point for continual monitoring, is to really focus on those contracting houses and 1099 contractors.
If I have to offer any suggestions to the industry, I'm going to say continuous monitoring, and particularly this environment in this world today, is very, very critical for their compliance purposes as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's it. And I'll go back to kind of best practice. So by putting conduct policies in place and by defining what's acceptable or unacceptable behavior by the individual, and then having a monitoring system behind it to make sure you're ensuring compliance. Like, not only are you managing risk, but now you're making it really a policy-based assessment that you're going through. And that puts every organization on a great legal framework and foothold.
Most certainly. What type of risk signals and indicators do you work with?
So a lot of different behavioral data that categorically would range from all kinds of criminal or legal interaction. That could be from arrest to court information, or individuals that may be on a sex offender registry, on a criminal watch list, court or conviction information. So lots of different forms of criminal activity. Second would be publicly posted threats on the open internet or social media. Another would be internally reported incidents. So one thing we're trying to do, and one thing that our customers benefit from, is increasing the amount of peer-reported, self-reported, just internally reported issues and concerns. And then the last would be indications of financial stress. And so I feel like the financial stress for this industry may be a little bit more specific to certain roles within the organization, maybe not all employees, but indicating individuals that have significant financial stress and problems often sets up an opportunity to course correct or bring in employee assistance programs when resources are available.
Yeah, no, very, very well said. You know, if an organization is thinking seriously about human risk here, who typically today, particularly in a sports organization, owns workplace safety?
Yeah, I think in almost all cases, security is owning workplace safety. I think security is tending to now have an increased level of responsibility and authority broadly over this people risk problem. But I say that, and then I'm going to now say that I think working in partnership from a security team that's leading and working in partnership with their human resources and legal departments, so that they can all become aligned on, again, how to update policies, the communication out to the employee base on why they're putting certain security programs and postures in place. I feel like that level of communication is such an important factor for the successful execution of any employee monitoring, any of the employee risk management. Like, that is best practice. And if you can get steering committees or functional groups early on, where security probably leads it, because again, they have authority and accountability, but they're bringing their colleagues together from legal and HR functions so that they can all come align and communicate a consistent message out to the employee base.
Yeah, very good. In our industry, this question here might clarify for some of our administrators in the sports organization. What is the difference between continuous monitoring for behavioral alerts and doing periodic background checks?
Right. You know, that's a good question. So, and
Yeah.
I'm going to, let me actually answer that with an example.
Okay, good.
Right. So if you have an individual, let's say you run a periodic background check every January, and you have an individual that just passed their background check. And in February, they're arrested for aggravated assault, right? They're a threat to the organization. They're a threat to the individuals, to the customers, to the fans, et cetera. Now, that individual is going to have a court date that's set sometime out in the future. Maybe that court date gets set eventually and pushed back to November or December. This individual is still working. They've passed their background check in January. Next one's due the following January. Okay, now they're actually in court in December. Oh, here while they're in court, the next background check runs. Again, that individual was not convicted at that point in time. They've run two recurring or two periodic background checks over a 12-month period of time. The entire time this individual is interacting with it inside the organization, they're representing the organization, and it just doesn't get picked up. And that is the fundamental difference. So being able to do 24/7 monitoring. So when these high-risk behaviors and events occur, the organization becomes aware and can respond appropriately.
Yeah, very well done. Tom, I wanted to put your future hat on for a minute here. Are there any dangers you see on the horizon, particularly concerning or might be affecting a lot of people that's not on the radar screen now? I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but we need your advice here.
I think maybe, and I think probably there's a lot of folks in the audience or in the industry that would become increasingly aware of this. I feel like some of the external nation state threats into public arenas, stadiums, and venues, like it's increasing in sophistication. You have individuals being targeted to be exploited or bribed because individuals that are trying to commit violence are finding access or trying to find access by exploiting, social engineering, finding individuals that are hiding something from their employer, like they're using the employee as a means of access so that they can get in and do bad acts and violence inside their target. So I feel like that level of sophistication is something that over the past 5 years is operating at a whole different level. And you hear the FBI and Homeland Security talk about it as well.
Yeah, very serious concern. And that's why my next question is really important to the industry here is how does a sports organization even get started, Tom, to implement or expand their inside threat continuous monitoring program or investigating the program for human risk signals? How do they get started?
Sure. So there's a few ways that I think I see customers often get off to a good start on it. One is a data-driven risk assessment, right? So you can look at population, you can look at roles within your organization, populations of your workforce, and you can assess what the risk is by looking at some of these events at that point in time, right? Not only is that it's quantifying the issue that you have or may have, it's also helping to fill gaps potentially on, let's say, background checks that weren't necessarily effective in the past. So risk assessment from a data perspective is certainly a good start. I think updating both the onboarding documents for employees, like that's important. Most of the successful programs that we see are consent-based by the employee. So the organization at the time they're onboarding new employees, just like they do with the background check, right? So we're asking for your authorization to run the background check. We're asking now for evergreen authorization to say, I need to look at that information when you first join. but based on your role, I need to keep looking at that information on an ongoing basis. So I think organizations can start by updating their onboarding documentation. And as I mentioned early on, updating conduct policies and employee ethics policies and policies that would be relevant to support the security programs that are in place. So again, I think that's an easy starting point. And the other comment I would make is a lot of organizations will start with high risk roles for monitoring, or as I mentioned earlier, 1099 contractors as the starting point as they're rolling out and evolving and maturing that program.
Now, do you assist the organizations through this early process?
100%. 100%. So we're really collaborative with customers on this. I think we've got a lot of real good, relevant industry experience and expertise in these areas. Everything from how they can identify the right roles. We'll share and work on sample policies, sample authorization documents. Like we have a variety of tools and documents to really help organizations start off and understand how they best want to implement, because no company is exactly the same, right? No organization's the same. And based on the risks and based on their objectives of the organization, I think we do a really good job partnering with them to tailor a good way to get going.
We're at the point now. Can you share any specific examples of customers that you took them through this process?
Sure. So, well, and I'll share an example.
Yeah.
I'll share an example specific to the industry, right? So we had a customer recently that we were monitoring a population of employees whose responsibility was protecting venues, right? We identified an individual who had been arrested for smuggling contraband into a prison.
Okay.
So just think about this for a minute. This is a watch the watchers moment, right? This employee's entire job was to prevent weapons and individuals from coming into a venue and creating risk. And yet outside of the workplace, it's exactly what this is the behavior they were up to. Like, I feel like that idea of watching the watchers and focusing on security and making sure that in your most high risk positions, that you've got a good ongoing evaluation of that risk. And again, that's a good example too, where how do you get started? In this case, and with a lot of our customers, again, it's starting with certain populations of roles within, and then expanding that process and adding in more evaluation of criminal data, adding in some new roles that represent risk.
Yeah, that's very well said. For this podcast and for our organization, how should organizations address supply chain and vendor risk? That's important to us.
Yeah, I think so. Starting with the flow down of requirements so that any of their contracting houses, any of their suppliers are going to run the appropriate vetting, both at the point in time, but on an ongoing monitoring basis. I think that's really critical. I think the other thing that's important is the organization, the venue, the stadium, the team doesn't need to have responsibility for investigating those individuals, because I don't think they have the resources to do it, right? So I think there's an opportunity, and we see this with our customers, where you're pushing down responsibility for employee management to the vendor and contracting house themselves. You can become aware if there are issues in real time. So the venue or the stadium or the organization can know, hey, I've got a particular vendor out there that's got some serious employee issues, and I know and I can control that risk. But at the end of the day, the responsibility gets pushed down into the contracting house for them to investigate, verify, and take appropriate employee actions. I think that's a key piece of it.
That's a key piece of it, yeah. Tom, the organizations that are watching, they want to get started, how can they reach you?
Oh, so again, our company is ClearForce. Our website is clearforce.com. And my email address is tmiller@clearforce.com.
Very good. Tom, what a great conversation today. I think we have a chance here to help many organizations in our country do a better job when it comes to the human side of their responsibilities, you know. So thank you so much for spending time with me.
Yeah, Dr. Lou, I really enjoy it. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.